Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elaine Didier, and I have the distinction of overseeing and leading two presidential facilities. The Presidential Library for President Ford is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the museum is in Grand Rapids, 130 miles away. And afterward, I'd be very delighted to reveal the secret of how that came to be. But at any rate, for today's discussion, I have suggested something that is not really my favorite, but something that I think represents a very significant part in our recent history, and which has a lot of meaning for me for a whole variety of reasons. It also is a wonderful story in terms of the juxtaposition of what presidential libraries offer: the object, the correspondence, the cables, the audiovisual evidence of a particular event in history. What you see before you on the right is an 18-step stairway, which was on top of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon and was the exit vehicle for 2,100 Americans and South Vietnamese civilians who were loyal to and on the staff of the embassy. That was their exit route from the top of the embassy in the final days of the fall of Saigon. So that would have been in April 28th and 29th of 1975. That was a very difficult time for us. On the left, you see the front end of a Huey helicopter that was one of the ones used in that evacuation. This evacuation took place from the embassy because by this time, on the 28th of April, the North Vietnamese had started bombing the airport near Saigon, and we could no longer use fixed-wing aircraft, in other words, larger aircraft, to take people out. And so with the airport closed down, they reverted to using helicopters to and from Navy ships stationed in the South China Sea. And there were hundreds and hundreds of sorties to pick people up from sites around Saigon and in the end from the embassy compound. Next slide I want to show you is President Ford on that staircase in the lobby of the museum. It's now upstairs in an exhibit, but this is early on after it had been refurbished. The third photo I want to show you, though, is the one that you remember most of all, and that is what you think was the staircase on top of the embassy. However, it is not. This is the iconic photo that we all remember from that period, but this in truth was from a building used by the CIA. It was a CIA safe house where the station chief and other operatives were living. And this was an exit right at that same period, but it was taken by a photographer, but is actually not the one at the embassy. What's interesting about this photo, though, is that you think back to that time and what would have happened after the U.S. pulled out from Vietnam. Our embassy was abandoned, and in fact, I can quote from some recent writing, think of the embassy abandoned, a weed-choked eyesore where chickens wandered among shards of broken glass. And what's interesting about this to me is the way we got the staircase, and that's what I want to share, because you might wonder how presidential libraries or other museums obtain things, and sometimes it's a very bizarre story. In this case, the embassy was abandoned, we had no relations with Vietnam, and in 1994, just as the U.S. was considering reestablishing relations, the son of a member of the Ford Foundation board was doing business in what was then called Ho Chi Minh City, and his taxi stopped by the embassy and he took a picture of the photo of the staircase on top of the embassy, brought it home, and there ensued a very heated discussion among members of the Ford Foundation board, including Dr. Henry Kissinger, about whether this staircase should be added to the display. And there were certain people who were vociferously against it, saying that it represented a time of humiliation and embarrassment for our country. And it was President Ford who finally, I am told, slammed the table with his hand and said, "Damn it, Henry, it needs to be there. It's a part of history. It happened on my watch." And if anything, he viewed it as a symbol of freedom and the desire to be free, much as the Berlin Wall piece that we have on display and other presidential libraries and museums have represented the desire of the people to be free. Now, having said that they wanted the staircase to be there, there was this little matter that it was still on top of the crumbled embassy in Saigon. And so it took, President Ford wrote to the State Department in 1995, requested it, was told that we had no ability to get it out. There ensued months and months of email and telephone calls, and finally it took a visit by then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright to the museum for an event where she casually asked President Ford, "Is there anything I could do for you?" And he said, "By the by, I'd really like that staircase for the museum." And lo and behold, the State Department called within 3 days and asked how we would fund it. And indeed, a Grand Rapids, Michigan company paid to have it transported by, as I'm told, a slow boat from Vietnam. And it finally arrived and then was put on display in 1999, and we have it on display now. The next couple of slides are also from the other materials that we have. We'll go to the next. Next slide, please. Oh, it was removed. Okay, the copy we had. Other things that I can just relate that we have in our collection, I won't speak to visually, have to do with photographs from the final negotiations. There were heated and intensive meetings in Washington from that period of time involving the president and his cabinet. We have the final cables from the fall of Saigon, and as one of my colleagues said, I literally get chills when I show them to people, and if you come to Ann Arbor, Michigan at the library, you too can handle them, and the intensity of that very difficult period, the cables going back and forth about companies and the administration wanting to get people out, Ford and others wanting to get out as many of the South Vietnamese as we could, as well as our own staff, military and civilian. It's an extraordinary period in our history, and that's why I decided to share it with you.